Welcome into episode 218. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at Pegasus Podcast by KSN @gmail.com. Christian, how's it going? It's Sunday. I should say that now. We're recording a little early because I'm supposed to be flying out to St. Louis tomorrow morning. But how are you? How are you on this Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. It's pouring rain here and also pouring rain where you are because
Yes.
it's a hurricane, tropical storm. There's something.
Tropical storm. I think it might become a hurricane before it hits
Okay. My
the
dad's very into
land.
weather stuff. And he, as dads are, and he was really because I did it with my parents the other night, and he was really like surprised because I was just kind of like, no one cares about this storm. And he was like, it's the first hurricane of the season. And I was like, oh, okay, I see. I didn't know that. So I guess that's how it's going to become a hurricane at some point. But
Yeah.
basically, that was all to say is that if this podcast has connectivity issues, it's going to be because of that. So we will hope and pray for the best, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, hopefully not. But also on this Sunday, UCF had its first scrimmage of fall camp, and you were there for the post scrimmage press conferences.
I
I almost
was.
said post game press conference.
We love
Guess
when
this is a
UCF
little bit of a
schedules
game.
access is on the weekend, so I can actually go.
Yeah. So we're gonna get into our UCF preseason awards as we always do around this time of the year. But before that, we'll have a little bit of a talk about some recent press conferences. Obviously, fall camp started, so we've been getting a little bit more UCF content in the last week or so. We'll go in chronological order with how we're going to do this. We'll talk about today's presser with Gus and the players in a minute, but we'll start with last week with Ted Roof's media availability. I don't even know where to begin with this. So Trey Stroko asks him, and you might be able to phrase this better than me because I'm just remembering off the top of my head, but he asks him basically because Addison Williams is the co-defensive coordinator by title. Asked him kind of what was it, the distribution of
So
tasks
I have the
are?
transcript of this
Okay,
because
because Ted Roof is a madman.
so when I have the transcript of this because when it happened, I needed to talk with you about it immediately, and I messaged you. And I think you were at Bucks practice or something. Like you weren't going to be
Yes,
able to listen to
yes.
it anytime soon. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it so bad that I then listened
Transcribed
to
it.
and transcribed the interaction and then sent it to you in text form and was like, "Let me know what you think." So I have it here. So Trace asked what the distribution of task is between Ted Roof and Addison Williams. Which, for the record, before we dive in, if you haven't seen this and don't know what Ted Roof's reaction is, that feels like a pretty mundane question to me. That does not feel like something you would expect a large reaction from of, hey, you both have DC titles. What's the distribution of tasks between? Doesn't seem, I don't know. But anyway, so that was asked. Ted Roof replies, distribution of task. You know what? I've been doing this 38 years, and that's the first time I've ever been asked that question with that verbiage. Distribution of task. Congratulations. It's been fine. That's the distribution of task. Trace then said, what are you doing and what is he doing? To which Roof replied, I'm doing what defensive coordinators do. He's doing what co-defensive coordinators do. Trace then said, which includes, and Roof replied, I'm not going to sit here and talk about a job description. That's not what I'm going to talk about here. Okay.
I don't like him. I really don't like him.
So I feel like we've been pretty open about, well, I guess you just were open by declaring you don't like him. I think we've been pretty open as a podcast is that we were skeptical. I think me in particular, I took a lot of heat for that on social media. I was skeptical of if that was the best hire UCF could have made. I wasn't anti bringing in someone to replace Addison Williams as the primary DC. I was just more surprised that that was the hire they went with. That interaction, while I don't think it means anything for the season, doesn't like lower my concern in any way, shape, or form. That is the easiest question in the world to answer. What's the distribution of tasks? Like, what would have been wrong with him just saying, oh, yeah, it's great. We have different skills and we lean on each other to make the defense better, move on. I don't know why he seemed to take it seemed like he was taking offense to being asked that
Yeah,
question and got very defensive very quickly of why that would be discussed. I don't know. It was just a really, really, really weird reaction to a not unusual question.
he reacted like when Michael Scott and Jim Halpert were co-managers, but Michael was still trying to like make it clear that he was like the main one. Like he is like
Right.
he's the regional manager and Jim's the co-regional manager, and he was trying to like establish the hierarchy. That's what it felt like Ted Roof was doing, and it did not need to be done.
But
Like,
to be fair, like he is like their titles
yeah,
are
it
Ted
is.
Roof is the defensive coordinator and Addison Williams is the co-defensive coordinator, which I feel like we need to work on what co means because I don't know if UCF's using it properly because
No,
that's how they label their coordinators. But everyone knows that it wasn't like Trace asked like, are you worried Addison's coming for your job? It was just who's doing
no.
what. You both have DC titles. I really confused by that.
It's absolutely a fair question too. When you're UCF and you have a defensive coordinator, a co-defensive coordinator, and what is it? I think three co-offensive coordinators. and none of them call plays.
Yes, although
Like that's
Gus did say that Tim Harris is going to like be assisting him with
yeah,
play calling in some
which
capacity.
I think we knew. I
Yeah,
think
I
we
think we
kind
knew
of
that.
knew that.
But yeah, so let's see. So defensive coordinators, are there only two? I feel like someone
I
else
think
might have a
so. Oh,
co-DC
maybe
title.
if they do, then the
Um,
question's even more fair.
but I know for a fact on offense, it's Gus Malzahn is the offensive coordinator, if we're being serious. And
Wait,
then
is Tim Harris the offensive coordinator in title, and then Darren
yes,
Hinshaw in is it Herb Hand
yes.
are the
Tim
two
Harris,
co's?
their official titles, Tim
Yeah,
Harris is offensive coordinator, Darren Hinshaw and Herb Hand are both co-offensive coordinators. Again,
but
we need
Gus
to
is the play
work,
caller.
and none of them actually call plays. And again, we need to work on what co means because it does not. They have changed assistant to co, and I don't really know why, but it's not the first time they've done this. Whatever. But all that being said, like I said, I want to be clear that it's not like that interaction means anything. I'm not like, wow, now I'm even more worried about the defense because Ted Roof didn't like a question. I'm just more baffled. You don't usually get like a lot of interesting stuff out of the interview accesses with the coordinators, except for Darren Hinshaw, who would just straight up tell you how every single player was performing. It was just such a strange reaction. I'm a little confused by it, so I figured it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, again, it doesn't mean anything for on-field stuff. I already had enough concerns with the on-field stuff, just or not concerns necessarily, but questions, and it's still kind of a question mark because and also every time anyone's asked about Ted Roof, it's just he's aggressive and great. Like we'll see. I want to see what that looks like. I want to know more. I know they're not going to give that all away, but I already was like not a big fan of this guy. It does feel like he's just kind of here, and we'll see if he turns it around, but not off to a good start, at least
Surely he's
personality
going
wise.
to turn it around, right? Like I've been thinking about this. He will get credit because there is no way the defense is anywhere near as bad as it was last year. They brought in too many new good players. It might not be great, but they're like I
Yeah.
can't fathom that we're halfway through the 2024 season and once again like yeah, they can't stop anyone. That's crazy. Like I just don't buy that. So he'll get credit. It's just is there a cap
What
on what they can accomplish because they went for a safe hire? I don't know.
he'll get credit whether or not he actually deserves the credit. We'll see how that works
Particularly
because
since he was not yet a coach when they recruited any of these players. He was hired
yeah.
after they had signed all these guys. So he can't even get credit for assembling them. So we'll see. But,
Yeah.
we'll hope for the best, I guess.
What was it that Gus said yesterday too at media day? He was somebody asked him about Ted Roof, and he was like, "The great thing about Ted Roof, we won a national championship together." And that was the first thing he said, and I was like, "You're not beating the Buddy Hire allegations,
I
Gus."
know.
But
I
we'll
know.
see. We'll see how it all works out. But today's press conference, you were there, so I'll let you take the lead. What you want to talk about because I haven't actually gotten to see him yet. So
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
so the backdrop for today's presser is their first scrimmage was today. So that's obviously the first big event of fall camp is where they get everyone out there. Gus gave very specific information about how the scrimmage went down. It was 123 total plays. Which is kind of like 3-2-1 in reverse. So there's a Space Game tie-in for you. That was so stupid, and
Nugget.
I apologize. They Gus said they did about equal reps among depth. There were about 40 reps for the first team, second team, and third team. So the point I'll make of that is there were a lot of comments about players who were playing well or did good things. We don't actually know where everyone played, so we're not sure like necessarily where in the depth those players played. But Gus had a lot of good things to say about the D line in particular. There was a lot of praise for them. The big takeaway that kind of became the main talking point of the presser and everything else was that there were, I believe it was 18 total penalties in this scrimmage, which if you've been, which it was 5 penalties for the offense and 13 for the defense. And if you've been following, fall camp at all, you would know that Gus's big talking point has been, we were so undisciplined last year. We need to work on our discipline. We need to cut back on penalties, all that. So it's the very first scrimmage, but you can argue is that alarm bells for you that they immediately were having a ton of penalties? Gus kind of pushed back a little bit on the idea that this was worrying, but what do you think?
It's more alarm bells for me because when you texted me, you said 13 total penalties, and now you're saying it was 18. It
It
was
was, I
13 on.
apologize. It was 18. It was 13 for the defense and 5 for the
Yeah,
offense.
that makes it even worse.
Well, it makes
I
it
don't
better for the
know.
offense because five's not that many for one
Yeah,
scrimmage. So
yeah, I guess that's fair. I don't know. Like you don't want to see it, but this is the time to have them happen, I guess. Like I've noticed it this week, or yes, yeah, the week that just passed in Bucks training camp. Like there's been flags on false starts, like random stuff. I don't know. Maybe I think I would be more worried if this doesn't really make a lot of sense, but if it was like the second scrimmage and they were doing that, but like
I
this is
think that
also
makes
the
sense.
first time they're getting back to like live football. So
And that
yeah,
was kind
maybe
of along the lines of what Gus said, because he was asked a few times about, are you worried about that? Is that a concern? Are you surprised that it's that many? And I liked when he was asked if he was surprised it was that many. His response was basically, well, you saw how we were last year. So like, no, I'm not surprised that we're having time to work on it, that it's not better. But what Gus said was that he said when you go three deep in a scrimmage, you're always going to see more penalties because it's just
Mhm.
guys who are in new situations. And he also said that and I thought this was interesting. He said the point of the scrimmage was not really that type of stuff. He was like, that's next week and what they're going to focus on. He said this scrimmage was all about trying to put the players in tough situations and see how they respond. Like the offense is in a 3rd and 13. Like, what are they going to do? Like, okay, they've had 2 bad drives. Do they rally or do they fall off? How does the defense deal with giving up a bunch of chunk plays? And like, that was more the focus of this scrimmage versus the real technical stuff. But it's just funny because
Mhm.
the penalties kept coming up in like funny ways. Like Gus got asked about running backs, and he at one point he was like, "Oh, Miles Montgomery had a 80-yard touchdown, which was really impressive. It got called back, but it was really good." And just like little things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think what freaks me out is not that I expect this, but it's just with all this talk, like the main talking point of fall camp being cut down on penalties. If we get to the season and they're still undisciplined and still committing penalties all the time, it's like, what do you do at that point? Like, do you just throw up your hands?
It feels like so I mean, obviously they were undisciplined last year. It feels like they've been undisciplined every year under Gus. I don't
Yeah, this
know,
is
like,
not, it's not like this came out of nowhere last year. It's been this way since
which is
this
why
staff has been here.
like we talked about it on the podcast last week because this is when he introduced his new talking point, but he has hammered this talking point more and more and more. But the whole idea of making sure this team reflects his personality and stuff, like he's like, oh, we need to get back to me, we need to get back to this. I'm like, okay, well, they were still undisciplined when you were like, I don't know, when the team had your personality 2 years ago. I know maybe last year you took a step back and did this other stuff, but like that's not why. I don't think. I think your
Yeah.
teams have just been undisciplined. So
But
I
on
don't
that
know.
personality front, it's interesting because I think we've talked about it before, and it was even clear in the press today. Gus is just different this time around. He seems a lot more. I haven't like picked the right word for you. Just a lot more. I don't know, locked in,
Edgy.
focused, edgy. Maybe I don't know. He wants. It's clear that he took his first ever losing season as a head coach last year very very personally, and he's just totally flipped the model. Because last year we talked about how he went into that more of the CEO role, which is what a lot of head coaches are doing. We kind of expected it. Took a step back from play calling, was focused on like locker room and talent acquisition and the portal and just a culture and all that. And he's totally flipped it this year. He's talked about repeatedly how he's not just calling plays. He's like, I'm a football coach. I want to run the offense. That's what I care about. He was even asked at media day about how the team's going to deal with the new scholarship rules. Because if you don't follow college football to a freak level like we do, there are now new scholarship rules that the football teams are going from 85 scholarship players to 110. And I think that starts next season. And they can also offer partial scholarships now, like other sports do. So he was asked how they're strategizing for that, how they're going to deal with it. He was asked this at media day, and he just goes, "Oh, he's like, I'm not. We have people looking into that. Like, I'm focused on the
Yeah.
team." And so it's just he went like the pendulum swing has been wild. It's been from last year where he went completely CEO to now he is completely running the offense, and it's like the other people need to figure out. So, and I will say, I want to say 2 things on that. The first one is the way he is going this season is the stone cold opposite of where the rest of college football is going. Like most head coaches are removing themselves from the actual play calling and running like the game planning week to week and more the big picture CEO, general manager type stuff. But the second point I want to make to add to that though is that we are literally like a year and a half into this, and we don't know what works. Everyone going
Mm.
that way doesn't mean that's the right way to go. So I'm not in panic mode over Gus wanting to focus on the things he's best at. I don't know. I've kind of changed my stance on it a little bit because I've just been so focused on all the other teams are doing this, but that doesn't mean it's going to work. Like I understand from his
Yeah.
perspective of he got here because he's a good offensive play caller, runs a good offense. Why stop doing that? So I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So the two things I think, like, I talked when we talked about it last week, I think I was looking at it a little more positively than I am now. I think I like kind of swung back more to the middle where I'm like, I don't know. He seemed like happier last year. Like it's
Yes,
something
he
like every
did.
time we hear from him this year now, it just seems like he's just angry or pissed off. And it's like that could turn into something good. I mean, he clearly has a chip on his shoulder, and I always think that's a good thing. But I don't know. I don't know. Like we don't actually know if it's going to result in. And the one thing that I know this is probably I'm not pushing back on against you. I'm more pushing back against him and maybe this idea. But yeah, what got him to this point in his career is that he was a good offensive play caller, and the certain things about being a coach. And I think in media day he said, I'm a high school coach at heart," like 15 more times. But yeah, he has gotten here because of that. But it's also been over a decade since like he first kind of revolutionized everything, and to be like wanting to return to his roots in this day and age in college football, like there's going to have to be some sort of adjustments made. Like he can't just
I agree.
expect to do what he did in 2013 and be like, all right, we're good. Like I don't know.
And
That's
there's
kind
a
of
very
scary.
real case to be made of what you're going off of now. I'll just swing back to your way of thinking is it's true that you can go back to what you were good at, but college football has changed so much. Maybe you're just not the right type of coach for this era. I'm not saying I feel that way about Gus because I don't, but if I'm saying if this season doesn't work, let's say like he goes all in on that stuff and is fully back to how he was 10 years ago, and the team is like 7-5, at that point, do you just say that's kind of where I've been going with my theory of like, I really wonder if he's the coach still next year is like at that point, do you just because he just seems so agitated with how last
Yeah.
season. And do you just say at that point, this maybe just isn't for me anymore? And again, I'm talking like I'm not saying I'm predicting this because I'm not. I'm talking like absolute worst case scenario. It just feels like when you deal in absolutes like this, it sort of puts your back against a wall in some ways. And I don't know. It's going to make for an interesting dynamic this season.
Yeah, because where do you have to go from there? Like if the
Yeah,
season doesn't work out the way he wants to, like what can he then try next year? Because I mean,
exactly.
maybe there's a middle ground that he tries to strike, but I don't know. Like that's is that something he's going to want to do? Like it's not. I don't know. If concerning is the right word, but it's like I'm trying to find the right word. Like
Well,
it's
it's just it's interesting in a scary way.
yeah,
Maybe that's concerning.
it's
Maybe
almost
I need to
like
give the
confused. It's like
definition for
confusing
concerning.
almost. It's like you
Well,
went
I'll
so
tell you what's
hard that one way
confusing.
last year. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you what's confusing is that he did. You're right. He went all the way over to this way last year, and then they went 6-7. And he's talked nonstop about how much they need to change. They need to take on his personality. He needs to get back to being himself and what he does best. And he wasn't himself last year. And it's time to get back to that. And it's like, I'm not in the room. I'm not a coach on the team. We don't know we don't know a quarter of what, we don't know a percent of what the actual coaches know. I acknowledge that. I had to keep lowering that percentage because I realized how arrogant it would be to be like, yeah, we only know half of what the coaches know. But at the end of the day, when you ask me what went wrong with the 2023 season, I didn't look at the season and go, well, Gus wasn't himself. I said they didn't have linebackers. They didn't have a good roster. And you can be yourself it wasn't going to change. They just didn't assemble a team that was very good.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Like when we were sitting here last December after the Gasparilla Bowl, it wasn't like, oh man, like if only this team would have been more like Gus Malzahn's personality, they might have won 8 or 9 games.
No,
Like,
we were saying, man, if only they'd had a single linebacker. Like I just and honestly, we didn't have a ton of complaints about the offense last year. Yeah, they committed a lot of penalties, but we just kind of grown used to and numb to that over the years. But it just feels like at some point you have to say, hey, UCF was in a tough situation. Moving it from the group of five to power five is very difficult. There's always an adjustment period. They were never going to be like a 10-win team in year one, regardless of what personality the team took on. I don't know.
yeah.
That worries me a little bit too, that it's kind of, I don't know. I don't hate the him being more angry thing or more, because I do agree that things seem very laid back last year. And maybe that was the wrong attitude for a team going through a pretty historic shift as a program. But I don't know. It's just I feel like this stuff has been so public that we're gonna have to start looking at the season through this lens. Like there's gonna be a week where they lose a game and we're like, was that Gus's personality or was that the D line didn't hold up? I don't know. It's just
Well,
it's a weird dynamic.
where we maybe can leave this conversation. We might have more stuff we want to get to from the pressers, but
Couple things.
I do kind of want to bring it up to, like, I think it was Brandon Helwig asked him on Sunday at media, or not Sunday, today's Sunday, on Saturday at media days, I guess it was that Saturday?
Yep.
He kind
No,
of asked
Thursday.
him.
Media day was Thursday.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay. He kind of asked him, like, you keep talking about you want the team to be on your personality. Like, what does that look like? What traits do you want them to have? And his answer was just like, we want to be good. Like, I don't
Yep.
like, I don't know. His answer didn't really clear it up for us. It was just kind of like, all right, like, sure. It's almost like
It's an
he was like,
interesting dynamic.
Gus, this is a thing you keep saying. What do you mean by that? And he's like, I just mean that. Like it doesn't seem like it's any deeper than like what he means. Like I don't.
By the way, for our YouTube audience, I'm going to try to show an image here. You may have noticed that Bailey is a little bit laggy at times on the podcast.
No.
And yeah, Bailey doesn't know that. So I'm letting him know for
No.
the first time. And this would be why, since this is currently
Oh yeah.
Tampa. I'm showing a map of a weather map, and Tampa is quite literally like in the middle of it right now.
Man.
It's fine. It's not that bad.
Okay.
But a couple more notes from the
Is the audio laggy?
you've got a little bit of robot voice every now and then,
That's annoying. All right.
It's okay. There's nothing we can do about it except put on a happy face and keep trying no matter what. So a couple more notes on the presser, and then we can move into our main topic. So last week was Jakuri is going to take KJ's job from him, according to Twitter. And this week is Jakuri even second string? Because Gus declared that, or not declared, he just announced that all the quarterbacks were live in the scrimmage except for KJ and except for Dylan Risk. The Dylan Risk one was very interesting. There's really no reason for him to not be live unless he's second string or in the mix. Now the one caveat I'd put there, and I said this to you before we started recording, is that Dylan Risk is the only not new addition to that room. Like Jacuri and EJ and Riley Trujillo are all new, so it might just be a situation of they know what they have with him and they don't feel
Mm.
like. But if I'm Dylan Risk, I'd be kind of annoyed. I'm like, I've been working for a year. Like, it's let me show you how I've improved. But I don't know. Maybe we're reading into that one. I just was really surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I think was so when did Jacuri transfer in? That was after spring,
Yeah,
right?
he missed spring. He wasn't here for spring.
Yeah. So it was like all spring we were talking like, oh, Dylan Risk like we were hearing Dylan Risk looks good. He's going to be QB2. And then they brought in Jacuri Brown, kind of more like it felt like something where an opportunity presented itself and they're like, yeah, let's land this guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that doesn't erase that, Dylan had a good spring and was in a good spot. And so probably coming out of spring ball, he probably was QB2 and maybe going into fall, they're like, all right, yeah, we'll keep it that way. And Jacuri's gonna have to unseat him as KJ's backup. But I guess that's probably what it boils down to. I guess we all kind of just assume Jacuri's the backup, but like he still has to get there because Dylan was the backup all spring.
Which he might, or a week into fall camp, whatever depth they're working with now is not final. This is the week where even when they know where guys are going to end up, this is the whole, well, you got to prove it. So you're going to see some
Yeah.
incumbents and guys back from last year in spots. But which, a couple more notes quickly on that. Jacoby Jones, wide receiver from Ohio, Gus shouted him out as having 2 touchdowns in the scrimmage day, which is really good, obviously. I don't know why I said that. Like, in case you didn't realize, a wide receiver having 2 touchdowns is good. And I immediately, because I'm a skeptical person, went to, okay, well, we don't know like who's throwing those touchdowns. Was he with the first string or did he do well with the third string? But then KJ came up and talked about him and was very much talking as if he was the one who threw those touchdowns to Jacoby. So I'm thinking that maybe he was with the first string. So that's exciting. We've talked about, and we'll get into this later, but how they've had all these wide receivers and someone has to emerge. So that was interesting. Only I'm trying to see what else was interesting. Kevin Call got some shout outs, which I thought was interesting.
That's good to hear.
Ricky Barber said he had a big sack. There was actually just a lot of praise for the D line. Everyone seemed very pleased with how the D line did, which I guess isn't overly surprising a week into fall camp that would be the unit that's doing the
Yeah.
best. But
like, yeah, he said earlier, like Gus shouted out the D line, and I'm like, all right, you shouted out your best unit on the team. So
yeah, like
I mean, what else really
that'll do
happened?
it. And Xavier Townsend was the other player who was repeatedly being talked about a lot, both by Gus and by other players, as someone who
Good.
was doing well. So
Like to hear that.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Did they say when the next scrimmage is?
They did not. I don't think we even have
Cool.
a media schedule yet for when they will be practicing or anything. So I'm sure they will be though. We'll
Yeah.
just have to wait and see.
Yeah. I mean, what are we? We're about, as we're recording this, we're 25 days away
25 days away,
from kickoff. So that
which
would
is
be,
crazy to me. I just can't believe we're that close. I know it still feels like it's gonna go fast. It's gonna be one more week, and then it's gonna feel like hell. It's just gonna last forever.
yeah. Because I mean, what is it? 3 weeks from yesterday, from this past Saturday is week 0. So we have
Yeah.
that at least. So we're by the time we get to this coming Saturday, we'll have college football in 2 weeks.
I wish you still lived in Orlando.
Yeah, I get that a lot from you.
Yeah, I say it to you. Does a week go by where I don't at some point comment on how I wish you still lived in Orlando? Because I'm just like, it'd be fun to watch college football, but we can't. We should do it like we should just FaceTime each other and just watch games and just talk about them.
I mean, I haven't done that with college football, but actually I brought this up the other day with my friend. So I think anyone who follows me on Twitter or anything knows that I'm into wrestling.
Wait, really?
And during shut up. During COVID, we were supposed to go to WrestleMania in 2020. It obviously got moved and there was no fans. And then my friend and I, because it was COVID, we didn't even get together to watch it. We zoomed. We were on Zoom together the whole show and just like we're talking about it. So we could FaceTime and watch college football.
We're
I don't
gonna
know,
be
like
it's gonna be like there's gonna be one of us is gonna be on a delay and we're just gonna start shouting about things and the person has no idea what's
yeah.
going on.
We have to do that too. Sometimes with Pewter reporting, our Pewter game day streams, like, all right, we got to sync up our TVs and we're doing a live stream during the game.
Oh, I
And
haven't thought about that. That's probably
it's
very difficult to deal with.
it's not always easy. It's just like, oh yeah, that's probably good enough. And then there's like maybe a split second that's a difference. But all right, let's move into our UCF preseason awards. We've got 4 categories that we stuck with from last year: offensive MVP, defensive MVP, breakout transfer, and breakout freshman.
Should we, for fun,
Okay.
remind our listeners who we selected with our picks last year in our annual
Yeah, let's
prestigious
do it.
preseason awards?
Let's do it.
Do you want to go first?
My picks this year are very similar in like nature to last year. So
Okay.
we'll start with offensive MVP, and I will start. I picked RJ Harvey. My pick last year, RJ Harvey.
That worked out.
Yeah, it did work out. This year, like he's still the best player on the offense. Like I know They brought KJ Jefferson in. They still have Kobe Hudson, Xavier Townsend. I think could take a step forward this year. Penny Boone's exciting and maybe going to take some of RJ's carries away. But I think he's still the best player. He's still the guy on the offense. And yeah, we talked about it in our overs and unders podcast. I think he'll still go for over 1,000 yards. Gus's new thing too, another thing he's been talking about a lot. Last year was all Hinshaw, vertical passing, vertical passing. He keeps saying we're a running and play action team.
Yes.
So he's
said that
been
again today.
Yeah, he's been driving that home. And yeah, so if they're going to be a running team, RJ Harvey's the best running back on the team. I think he'll be the MVP.
Which again, this is where I get worried because we talk about last year and what we think went wrong with the linebackers and not stopping the run. And was Gus over there like it's all this vertical passing that's cursing us?
Yeah. I don't know.
Never considering it might have been because they were trying vertical passing with a quarterback who A is not accurate and B was basically playing with one leg for most of the season. Like, I don't know. But just a thought.
Yeah.
My offensive MVP last year was John Rice Plumlee. I've always been a big fan of his, and I was expecting a big year from him. And my offensive MVP this year is KJ Jefferson.
Okay.
That's because I'm a casual football fan who believes the quarterback is the only player who matters. No, my honest reason for it is a couple things. One, what?
It was funny. I like that.
One is that I feel like RJ Harvey's carries and stats are going to take a bit of a hit just because Penny Boone's going to be there as well that he's going to have to share the room with. And I think that's a healthy and good thing. Like, I'm not saying that like I think RJ will be a better player this year and a more effective and fresh player this year, especially late in the season. But I think that his stats might take a bit of a hit because of that. And at the same time,
according to Gus, he's still learning how to be a running back.
We got to stop with that. And the other reason I picked KJ is it just feels like, as far as all the offensive players, his level of production and talent most directly is in line with what the team can achieve this year to me. Like, it just feels like if he hits his ceiling and if he is as good as they think he can be, that's what's going to take him over the top. And we can start talking about them midway through the season, late in the season, as though they're really in it for a Big 12 title, for a playoff spot. And conversely, RJ Harvey I'm not expecting this. Like, this is crazy talk, but RJ Harvey can, for some reason, have a bad year and the team can still accomplish its goals because of how deep that running back room is, because of the other talent. If KJ Jefferson disappoints and is way worse than expected, it feels like the season's just dead in the water from that for me.
Probably. And that's a good point you made about KJ too, is like, if he hits his peak and what a quarterback's peak is, if he runs for, I don't know, 6 or 7 touchdowns, throws for 30 and has thousands and thousands of yards, like, yeah, he's going to be the offensive MVP and UCF will be very good. I think, I didn't really think about it like this because just my baseline of this was RJ Harvey's the best player on the offense,
which is accurate.
But the closer and closer we get to the season, I'm really starting to feel like they're going to win like maybe 8 games, and like KJ will have a fine season, but I just still think RJ is going to be that guy. So I don't know.
I've decided, and actually Gus hit it perfectly. It's probably my favorite thing he's ever said, because he got asked at media day by someone about how he feels about UCF being projected middle of the pack in the Big 12, and does that put a chip on his shoulder? And Gus I forget who asked him. Gus just looked at them and goes, everyone has brought in 40 new guys. I don't know how anyone can pretend they can predict anything right now. And I was like, you know what? That's the proper answer. Because the truth is, I've just given up on what to expect. I have no idea. Yeah. They assembled a roster that can win the Big 12, but that's only half the battle. Like, they could have done everything right, and they're still going to maybe lose games just because the Big 12 is the Big 12. But
I think my favorite thing that Gus has ever said is when he was talking about how he loves Mexican food, that the second thing he mentioned was cheese dip.
He said there was the third thing. He was asked. This was not at UCF, by the way. This was years ago at Auburn. He was asked what his favorite cuisine is, and he said Mexican food. I think at one point in the interview he said, if it's done well, I'll do it right, or something like that. And when listing,
it's like Jameis Winston saying, if we're gonna do it, then we're gonna do it big. Then, because if it's done right, then I'll do it right.
It was something. I hope I'm not butchering it. It was something along those lines. And when he was listing off his favorite Mexican foods, he said chips, salsa, and cheese dip were his favorite Mexican foods.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing he said.
I love Gus. I really want this year to work out. I want us to be able to look back on the Gus era as a success, and because I feel like, I don't know. I just hope that things turn around this year, but maybe they won't. Who knows? College football is not always a Cinderella story. Defensive MVP, who you got?
I have Lee Hunter. Last year I had Ricky Barber. So I just really love it's the strength of defensive line, and I had to like make this point last year that like it's hard for a defensive tackle to win. I think like to be the guy, I have all the stats on the defense, but this is again one of those things where I feel like it's the safer pick, that like he's probably going to be the best player on the defense talent wise. And when you look at last year, like he had 3 sacks, which I'd like to see that number go up a little bit this year. He had 11 tackles for loss. I saw some more like some other stats that I guess his 69 tackles overall were third most on the team, and he had more tackles than any other defensive tackle in the country, according to Pro Football Focus.
I did not know that. That
Neither did
seems
I
like a
until
very impressive
about 2 hours
stat.
ago.
And it's not like they
I
didn't
can't.
have depth there; like they were rotating.
I think it might have been on his like player profile page on UCF's website.
Huh.
I
Did
think
not know
that's
that.
where I learned it. But yeah, so I mean, I think he's going to be even better this year. Like I just think he's the most talented and probably best at his position on this defense. It's hard, and I made the point last year, like I said with Ricky Barber, like it's a defensive tackle is not going to have usually 12 sacks and 4 forced fumbles and have all the stats, but I think he's going to be a big key to this defense.
He's basically a brick wall on wheels, is I feel like how I would describe him. Like I'm not going to argue with you a ton on that pick because I think
Yeah.
he might end up being the best player on defense. I don't think anyone would be shocked if that's the case. Now, I do agree with what you said that he might not always have the stats to back it up. It's hard to get like the general fan base to notice a D tackle, but I'm not going to argue with
I
that pick.
have I have on my notes from last year for Ricky Barber, it says won't have the overall flashy numbers. So it's the same
We're
point. Maybe
just
next year I'm gonna pick John Walker.
we are
And
line
we'll
by
just
line. Bold of you to think he'll still
yeah.
be here next year. We are line by line.
I don't need
Uh,
you to say that right now. I
just
already think they're
repeating
gonna only
last
win
year.
8 games. So
All right. So, oh man, I'm realizing how much I just repeated last year. Okay. So last year, my defensive MVP pick was Jason Johnson, which I feel like didn't age horrificaly. It didn't age well. Some might even say it aged badly, but it didn't
you're
age
not
horrifically.
gonna so you're not gonna get a lot of people agreeing with you that
A
yeah, I mean
linebacker.
yeah, that a
Like,
linebacker on the 2023 UCF team. Even like he had the numbers, but
yeah.
and yeah, he wasn't awful, but the
He was their only
linebacker unit,
linebacker. He
yeah,
was
he
the
was the
only
only one.
one. So what can you do? My defensive MVP pick for this year is Ethan Barr, another linebacker. I actually feel good about this one. You can laugh and make your jokes, but I feel good about it for a
I
couple
didn't make a
reasons.
joke.
I was talking to the audience,
Oh,
not just you
oh, all
specifically.
right.
The reason number one is that I think just by existing as a linebacker, he's going to impress UCF fans. I think that it's going to be very interesting for them to see a guy who can actually, help contain the run. He's also gotten a lot of hype. He just seems like that guy who can just sort of be sort of maybe the heart of the defense and just be in the middle of the defense and make plays and be an impressive player. And like I said, I just think fans are going to appreciate him a lot, given what we've gone through a linebacker if he lives up to the hype, which again, we're into fall camp here and all signs are pointing towards he's living up to the hype. Let's not forget that his background was he was very good at Vanderbilt. And he went to Washington in the portal. He was just coming off a national championship appearance and only ended up at UCF because then Kalen DeBoer leaves Washington to take the Bama job. And he was back. He decided to not stick with that commitment, obviously, at that point and ends up here. So it's kind of like a steal they got him. And I think people are forgetting that a little bit. So I'm excited to see him.
Also, the only defensive captain
Very
out of
true.
the 4 captains.
Very true.
But I think like with him, I think it's probably a good pick just because what you said. Like all I need is for him to be steady. Like if
Yeah.
he's steady and he makes the tackles he's supposed to make and makes the plays and isn't out of position all the time, like yeah, we'll be feeling pretty good. I think about the middle of the defense. I mean, obviously they need more than one linebacker. They proved that last
No.
year, but I think he's I think he's going to be um, hopefully it seems like he's going to be a starter and he's going to be one of the guys they look to. So
You
that's
just
not
made
a bad
such a
pick.
good
And
point that I'm not coming out here saying I think Ethan Barr is going to be a superstar who flies all over the field. I don't think that's his game. It's what you said is it's just he's going to do his job and just and keep things from getting out of hand on every single play as they often did last year.
a linebacker is going to have the stats. Like I think what
Yes.
was it? Jason Johnson had like 120 tackles last year or something crazy.
Call it
Like he
now. Does
had
Ethan Barr call how many tackles for Ethan Barr? I'm going to say 85.
I was gonna say 97. I
Okay.
don't know. It seems like maybe a lot. I don't.
Let's try to
I might
remember
be
this in a
getting.
few months so we can come back and check.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do it. All right, breakout transfer. Mike's still going first. Are we sticking with this?
Yeah, let's just keep. I don't like going
All right,
alternate because then I
fine.
get confused.
All right. Breakout transfer. Last year I picked DeCorian Patterson,
Nice.
who I believe the year before had led the country in interceptions, and I felt like he was going to come in and be an immediate starter. And
Definitely
I
the
think
worst pick either of us made for breakout
yeah, I'm
transfer.
sure we'll get to it. And I even said like last year, like his interceptions could go down because he had 7 the year before. I think he could have like 3 or 4 interceptions and still be like a breakout transfer. He played like he was decent, solid, like he was in the rotation. maybe not a
Yeah,
breakout transfer, but
he wasn't a breakout, but he played.
yeah.
He was in the rotation. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just repeating what you said. You're correct.
My
All those statements are accurate.
my breakout transfer for 2024 is Dalen Dotson.
Ooh,
I
okay.
think there was a little bit of an oversight on this podcast when we did the transfer draft. Neither of us took him,
That's true.
and I regret it wholeheartedly.
I did take
Just
Najee Kelly, so it's not
you
like
did,
we just ignored the D line, but
yeah. And I think Dotson's in the mix to potentially start, but either way, I think he'll be in the rotation. And I don't know, I just reminding myself of like what he did before he got to UCF made me think like, all right, there's a good chance that he's going to be pretty good.
yeah.
He was an FCS first team All American at UT Martin. I brought this up on the podcast, or maybe I didn't, because if I would have brought this up on the podcast when we did the transfer draft, I feel like I would have drafted him, but I knew it at the time, so I don't know why I didn't draft him. He's, or maybe it was after I found out. Whenever I found this out, I was like, whoa. Again, referencing Pro Football Focus, who is not perfect, but they do grades that are, I don't know. The fact they quantify things makes it a little more digestible. So he's the highest graded returning edge defender in the Big 12. Based off his grades from last year, which I mean, it's a different competition level. Like it's not a perfect one-to-one transition, but just that's there. There's that. In his last year, he had 51 tackles, 19 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 7 pass breakups, which I mean for an edge defender is pretty crazy. I don't know. I think there's an opportunity at outside linebacker or whatever, edge, whatever they call it in this defense.
Edge is what you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm get mixed up because now that covering two teams, the Bucks edge defenders are outside linebackers
I was
too.
going to say, because you said outside linebacker, and I was like, I don't think that's accurate,
Yeah,
but that does
no,
make sense.
that's what it is.
They
But
have an
yeah,
opening there too. Someone's going to have to fill in there because they basically have Malachi Lawrence, and we're kind of waiting to see who else steps up. And I also don't think they want to do the same thing they did with Celiscar forever and Traylon Morris Brash, where they just keep
yeah,
the same two edge rushers out there on every single play of the game. So I think that is probably a smart pick. I would not be surprised if you were right about that. The
hopefully.
cool thing about a transfer draft this year is usually we look back on it a year later and it's really bad and we're like, wow, what were we thinking? This year we finished it and within an hour we're like, we did a very bad job. And one of those was Dalen
Uh,
Dotson not being selected.
Even going into it, we were both like, "This is going to be bad."
Yeah,
I was dreading
we
that
just knew.
podcast. I was dreading recording it.
Neither of us took Deshaun Pace. And it's like the podcast ended and I think the first thing one of us said was like, we didn't take Deshaun Pace. Like it
Yeah,
was
and I
just
had him ranked. I had him on my big board, if you want to call it that. I had him ranked higher than Brian Threats, and I took Brian Threats instead.
I don't know what was going on that day.
I'm
It
not a
was
very
tough.
smart person. Okay, you're a
Yes, you
breakout
are.
transfer.
You're the smartest host of this podcast. All right, my breakout transfer pick last year was a doozy. I picked Corey Gamage, the Marshall wide receiver, who the reason I picked him was because he'd been very good at Marshall, and I figured that, he was someone who could step in. He was a big bodied receiver. Felt like that made sense. I don't believe he ever even dressed for a game. Still not totally sure what
Don't
happened
remember.
there. But I've learned my lesson. I understand that a G5 wide receiver, just because he caught a lot of passes and is big, isn't going to work out at this level. So I went ahead and took Jacoby Jones for my breakout transfer this year. Big body receiver, 6'3", 228, really lit it up at Ohio in 2022. He caught 45 balls for 777 yards and 6 touchdowns. He got hurt last year, but he was off to a big start beforehand. I know what you're thinking. Now, wait a second, Christian, that's just Corey Gamage again. And you might be right, but I have the first scrimmage on my side where he caught 2 touchdowns, so I've decided I'm justified in this pick.
You talked to 2023 Christian, and you were like, "Hey, can I borrow your answers?" And he was like, "Yeah, just change a couple of
I
them."
swear to God, you saw me look up last year's for the
Yeah.
first time before. I had not consulted last year's, and I'm realizing now I just did the exact same thing for every single pick, which is interesting.
I mean,
But
I did for the first two as well, so it wasn't really.
there's
Yeah,
no way it happens twice, right? With the
sure
wide
there is.
receiver. There's no way. Just
Sure there is.
mathematically speaking, Jacoby Jones, Corey Gamage
If
never had 2 touchdowns in a scrimmage, so he's already ahead of schedule.
it could happen just because, I mean, if it does happen, then we'll just know that they need like. Well, I guess that's not true. I was gonna say like last year, all the transfer wide receivers they picked up were not good.
Every
Like
single
or
one was
none
bad.
of them played. But the year before that, they got Kobe Hudson and Javon Baker. So like they can
Yeah,
do it.
we don't talk about enough how insane of a hit both of them were. Like to land Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson, not just individually, but in the same portal class, 2 all Big 12 level wide receivers is kind of crazy. And Jacoby
Yeah.
Jones will be the third of that group because I expect him to have a huge year. So
I hope.
a
Well,
lie.
I
I
was gonna
just
say I
hope he
hope
doesn't.
so. I'm kind of lying because I want Javarius Johnson to be that guy because I picked him in the transfer draft. So
How this is going to work is we're all going to lose because it's just going to be that like there is no clear wide receiver three. There's just going to be like 3 or 4 guys who all put up like 150 to 250 yards and like a touchdown here and there. Like that's what's going to end up happening.
Which we don't have to have the whole conversation again, but we talked about this weeks ago that like even the 2017 team, like their number 3 receiver didn't put up like
No,
600, 700 yards.
they really
I
had
don't
two
remember what the
receivers.
exact, yeah.
Yeah.
So they could still be fine as an offense and have their number 3 receiver have 250, 300 yards.
I genuinely do feel really good about Jacoby Jones, though, just because he was so productive at Ohio. And I think because of him coming off the injury, I think that UCF was able to get him when maybe he would have had. I'm not going to say like UCF's a good program. I'm not saying like there were like way higher offers, but I just think that that kind of gave them an in. And now that we're seeing that he's healthy and playing well already, I just feel like, I don't know, that feels like one that might work out.
Yeah. The other ones I actually had written down honorable mentions for all these and have not mentioned any of them during like each category. When we talked offensive MVP, I mentioned KJ. Defensive MVP, like I think Tennyson and Pace are both guys that could have big years.
Pace in particular is starting to feel more and more like a guy that we're going to feel silly we weren't talking about more in the offseason. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's hard. When you bring in 4 linebackers, you're like, all right, well, which ones ones should we be talking about?
You have to guess until you actually hear what's going on.
But yeah, so I had Jacoby Jones as an honorable mention. Mac McWilliams, maybe. I don't know if there's anything there he's the former UAB captain.
Exists, but yes.
I just don't know what's going to happen in the secondary really. So hard.
I have that note for my next one. Is just it feels like the secondary is still. Should we try to put together the secondary right now? How many pieces? Didn't we just do this? We might have just done this.
I think we did this last week when we talked about
I'll stop then. Never mind.
Damari's injury.
Yeah, we did.
Okay. Forgot somebody. I forget.
We should do a new weekly exercise where we try to put together the secondary and it'll look completely different every single week. And then one of the podcasts will end up being right. But
secondary of the week.
We know Brandon Adams at corner. That has to be one of them. Ladarius has said he's playing safety. So that's 2. I think that's more or less what we know. So
Quadric Bullard always ends up on the field. So
Quadric Bullard got a lot of love at the press conference today. So
not surprising.
There you go.
He's always out there. Breakout freshman. So here's what happened with breakout freshman.
Don't say it on the podcast. Ugh.
I told you I was going to, and you're like, that's fine. We both ended up with the same pick, which we had the same pick last year, but Christian wanted me to change mine this year, so I did. I quote unquote went with wide receiver Burdell Richardson.
What a great pick. Good job, man.
Yeah, really awesome. I honestly, before we had this conversation before the podcast, like I was between these 2 guys that we're going to talk about. I ended up choosing the guy Christian is going to talk about. But I just
wanted one of us to take each of them so we could talk about both of them. And I felt like I couldn't take Burdell because I took a transfer wide receiver for my breakout transfer. So it felt weird to be like, they're both going to break out. But so this is fine. We're just rigging
it's fine.
Picks. It's
we could have also talked about them anyway. Because we've talked about multiple people for all of the other. You know
what's going to happen now is Burdell is going to literally put up like 1,200 yards or something insane.
Yeah, and then I'm going to be like, wow, my breakout freshman.
Yeah, and I'll be the guy who you just 4 times are like, why don't you just change your pick to Burdell? And you'd be like, no, I want the one I picked.
But yeah, I do think he's going to have a good season. Like I'm just a little less certain because I don't know what that number 3 wide receiver spot's going to look like. We talked about, you and I talked about this over text the other day. Like, should we read into the fact that, like, I think it was media day when they brought out Trent Whittemore as like the other guy they brought out, and we're like, I don't know if it means anything. But between Whittemore, between the transfer receivers Jones and Johnson, like I don't know. There's a chance that Burdell doesn't necessarily carve out a big role for himself this year, but he did. He had a really good spring. Was talked about a lot. I think he's a talented, freshman, but again, you never really know with a true freshman how big of a role they're going to have. But I do feel good about him this year and in the future. So I'm fine, being forced to take him here with my breakout freshman pick.
It's a tough one because it is hard really for any true freshman to not just contribute, but to be like a genuinely really important player to the team. And the only thing that'll hold him back is just if other guys hit, right? Like if Jacoby Jones does end up just being awesome, or if Javarius Johnson, then it's going to take away some reps. But I mean, he seems like someone who everyone's excited about. So
it's that and the offense they're running, like the fact that they're running, whatever he said, a running and play action team. Like they're going to run the ball a lot with RJ. KJ's going to run. Penny's going to run. And then when they throw the ball, it's largely going to be, I think, Kobe, Xavier Townsend, Randy Pittman at tight end, maybe.
Yeah.
So whoever that third wide receiver ends up being might not have a breakout type of year.
Yeah. his cap might any third wide receiver's cap might be like
Yeah.
450, 500 yards. Like that might be about what the ceiling is, just because
if he topped 400 yards this year, I'd be very pleased.
That's a breakout for a true freshman.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
I think so.
But
All
anyway,
right, your breakout freshman.
Let's talk about my unique pick that only I selected for breakout freshman. Oh, I should say last year I selected Randy Pittman, and so did Bailey.
Oh, I did as well. Yes, we had the same one last year.
Yeah, so no way it could happen this year. I took Chasen Johnson, which is never a name that I would have imagined myself saying really in any season, let alone this season when this recruiting class was put together. He's the third lowest rated player in the class. But literally from when he got on campus in spring, there's been a lot of talk about, hey, keep an eye out on Chasen Johnson. He's playing really well. Coaches talking about, players talking about. He's someone to keep an eye on. So I don't know. It's just I'm still a little hesitant just because I keep having that thing in my brain that's just like he's a true freshman. But I don't know. When you hear that much about a player, you just feel like you have to mention them.
I can think of a couple examples, I guess, for both the wide receiver and like defensive back position as like recent years, like modern era UCF true freshmen to have like good, solid, freshman seasons.
Can I guess your examples?
Yeah, go ahead.
Your wide receiver is going to be Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
And
trying to think
your defensive player is going to be Richie Grant.
No, that's a good one. Like okay. I think because what Braden Marshall as a freshman like played quite a bit. Nikai Martinez like did so as well. So like that's part of the reason I started leaning toward picking Chasen Johnson because he did have a really good spring. I remember it's going to be dumb that if he ends up not being good, but like there was one or two plays in the spring game where I saw him and I was like, wow, like he's going to be really good. And it was just the most basic thing ever.
That's why it's even more dumb that I took this pick away from you because you were so high on him after the spring game. Like that night, you were just like, he looked
Which is why I was surprised because when we talked, like we started hinting before the podcast and you were like, I think I know who you took. And I was like, oh, I haven't talked about Chasen Johnson in a while. And then you were like, you took the receiver. And I was like, no.
I thought I was certain you were going to take Burdell. I don't know. And you did after I forced you.
Yeah, I did. But no, I was like actually even like looking up more because we obviously heard a lot about him in the spring. Fall just started, so like we haven't heard a ton. But when you look at like kind of stuff that, and again, it's all based off of spring because I think during the spring, Gus was like, you look at him and he doesn't seem like he's a true freshman. Like he just seems like he kind of gets it. But there was a few lists that come out every summer. It's like, oh, who are some of like the impact true freshmen or the like kind of some of the freshmen to watch around, whether it's the country or the Big 12. There was one, I forget, I don't think I wrote down the website, but they picked 3 Big 12 true freshmen who were, poised to make an impact. And he was the one listed, or he was one of the 3 listed. And then 247 put out their 100 first-year players who would influence the season. And UCF had one representative, and it was Chasen Johnson. So I think a lot of it is based off of the spring, and it's based off of Gus saying, he looks not like a true freshman, but that's an indicator that he's ahead of where they thought he'd be, where they thought, or where he's supposed to be as a true freshman. So yeah, I think he's going to be. He was running with the 1s and 2s all spring. So I mean that means I think already that he's going to be in the mix, in the rotation. Maybe he ends up starting. I don't know.
It's also a group of positions where guys rotate in and out. It's not like something where there's this huge barrier to entry of him getting on the field. So yeah, I feel very good about my pick.
Yeah, you should. I think it's a great pick. Cool. All right, those are the 4. Should we add no, I was going to say should we add a 5th one on the spot, but I just could not think of one right off the top of my head. I did think of one earlier. I did think of one earlier. It was uniform based, but I couldn't really fully flesh out the idea. It was more like which game is going to feature their best uniform?
Well, that's a loaded question because I can just declare Arizona and whatever the space uniform is.
Non-space game. There's a caveat.
Game. There you go. Non-space game. I feel like I don't know. Because honestly, it's not always like you could argue the best combo they wore last year was for Kent State.
Yeah.
So it's tough. I don't know.
I was going to lean toward Colorado or Utah.
Yeah, those are the 2 big home games.
Because Colorado has the black and gold factor where it's like, all right, like they want to be,
you have to like
good black and gold.
You have to flaunt black and gold against Colorado, for sure, to establish dominance as the black and gold team of the Big 12.
Utah, because it's Black Friday, feels like a blackout. So
I was about to say Utah has to be a blackout, right? Like without question.
Yeah,
and
we know it can't be an away game.
Jersey, white pants now.
It can't really be an away game because the base white jerseys are not as good as they used to be.
And you don't like light mode. So really there's just no road jersey.
I don't have a problem with light mode. Did I say that?
You've said that repeatedly. Yeah, what do you mean?
Have I?
Every time I talk about light mode, you're like, eh.
It doesn't look like great. It doesn't always look great. I like the idea and I like the pictures of light mode. But on the
It's
field,
a very photogenic jersey. It does look
yeah.
very good in the photos.
TV cameras, maybe not. Not as
Well, it
much.
depends on the game. I do think that it's not the best game for, or it's not the best uniform for like direct sunlight games. I think it probably works best as light because the numbers are reflective, so they're bouncing off. They get lost sometimes,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah.
guess I'll. What would you do for Utah?
Uh,
Like blackout, but blackout with night mode, blackout with Pegasus. What kind of decals are we
Blackout with
talking?
Pegasus, I think,
Okay,
and then like the white black. Yeah, because if you wanted to do like a gold decal, you'd have to wear night mode, and I'm
we wouldn't
thinking
have
more.
to. They
Well, you
did
wouldn't have to, but
blackouts for years with chrome gold
I'm
decals.
thinking of I'm thinking blackout with Pegasus jersey and the white UCF decal.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Okay,
That's what they wore for FAU in 2018.
I don't think they would do this because it's on national TV and they want the UCF logo on there, but. Unless they did like a whited out version of the Nighthead. I just want more Nighthead on the helmet.
Yeah, the Nighthead's pretty cool.
And I want more color, like more like versions of it. How many times have they worn it? Was it only the USF games 22 and 23?
No, they wore
Not 23, 21 and 22.
Let's do this. USF in 2021.
Yeah.
USF in 2022. They wore it last year. They wore it for Houston last year on one side of the helmet. But yeah, you're right that it's always been, we've only ever seen just the standard chrome gold version of it. We've never seen like
like a whited out version.
Which
like
with the old Nighthead, they did all
helmet.
kinds of crazy stuff with it. So I'd love actually, yeah, it could be cool to see like a white Nighthead on a black helmet and a black guy. I wonder how much of our audience we've lost with this. Like I know a lot of you don't care about uniforms. We're so down the rabbit hole, but what can you do?
All right, let's get into the football news. Lee Hunter, who was my defensive MVP preseason, was named to the Nagurski and Outland watch list. It's watch list season, so there's going to be a lot of this over the next few weeks, I think. Another one was Xavier Townsend being named to the Hornung Award watch list. I think is the best return specialist in the country. UCF fans wear is back for another year. We've long on this podcast held the opinion they should do black for night games, white for day games, but it's kind of getting closer to that. I don't know.
This has felt the closest to it. They're getting. I mean, they don't know the kick times, and we don't know the kick times, but this is it's simplifying. It does feel like it's simplifying.
Yeah, black for New Hampshire, which is the opener. White for Sam Houston on Family Weekend. Black for Colorado. USA for Cincinnati, since that's the military appreciation game. Fans' choice for BYU, which is homecoming. Space U for Arizona, and then black for Utah. So, and then black for all the away games, which I think has been a standard thing.
That's been a thing for years, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think like we don't have like what was they first tried to. I think it was because they had anthracite and all that stuff. They tried to do like the chain mail that one time. I think
in 2016 and 2017 they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. There was one game where they were like half the upper deck should wear gold, half should wear black, and the lower bowl. There is no upper deck, but you know what I mean. Like the upper level, and then the lower level should all wear white. Like they were trying all kinds of crazy stuff. Never once came close to happening. Like I don't mean like no. It's as if no one knew. Like it was not even close.
The reason I have one piece of gold UCF merch was because for the Cincinnati game in 2016. They wanted the fans to wear gold. I don't know if they wanted it all gold or if it was just like the student section was supposed to wear gold, but I went and bought a long sleeve UCF, gold UCF shirt that has the Stack logo on it. And I wore it to the game, even though it was really hot outside. I thought it was going to be cooler because it was in November and then the forecast changed. So cool. Those are the ones for this year UCF fans wear. Speaking of Family Weekend against Sam Houston, it's sold out. So that's is that 4 or 5 announced sellouts already ahead of the season? Yeah, see that is Christian is showing a picture of I don't know what year was this? Was this 2016?
2016 Cincinnati. It's gold on one side of the stadium, white on the other side, and the end zone
not even fully gold on one side and white on the other. Like it's like
it kind of just it's a little bit more white. I don't know.
I mean, I get the effort. I applaud the effort because when certain
my favorite was the moat.
The moat, yeah,
kind of looks like a toilet seat.
Schools that pull it off, obviously, like Tennessee does it, but like that's a long-standing tradition. Like I get UCF trying to go after it, and I do think that they could strike the right balance with white during the
We've
day,
we've
black at
given
night.
them the right balance. This isn't
Yeah,
hard. This can be your thing, and it would take like a year, and everyone would know to do this. If it's a day game, you wear white. If it's a night game where you wear black. That's it. We're done.
yeah,
Easy. We're giving these ideas out for free. Like I don't like just do it.
yeah. All right, that's it for football news. But game of the week is back, which
What?
took
What's
me
game
by
of the week?
surprise.
I guess I should open the outline for the first time since we started this podcast.
UCF women's soccer exhibition on Saturday against Miami. So we're back to. I wanted to include this just because it was like the start of, this like fall sports season. Like we're kind of getting back to it.
Are we doing exhibitions as game of the week?
Yeah, because it's back. Like it's always the marker of fall sports starting.
Okay.
Is like
this was such
because men's soccer also has an exhibition on Saturday, but this one's against Miami. And whenever they have a preseason one against, like they usually sometimes we'll play Miami or Florida, and it's always nice to see.
This was an incredible opportunity for you to say football is back before announcing that game, and I'm upset that you did it.
Well, it is. Football is back, but I just it's back. But yeah, game of the week's back. So we'll have actually like regular season games very soon.
It's exciting.
So,
we're very
exciting. I love it.
We got to go to soccer this year.
Yeah, and I always do. Like I do feel a little bit more sad these days when like this starts, because like when I was a student, it was always like, oh, this is awesome. Like I'm not excited for school to start, but like I'm back in Orlando. Like I'll go to this game on Saturday. Like I would have gone to this exhibition game against Miami as a student, but it's like now it's like, oh, I don't get to go. Like we try to get to a couple games here and there, like soccer or volleyball, whatever it is, but it's not the same when like I was a student and living in Orlando, could go to all the time.
I don't like you saying as a student, because even when you lived in Orlando after graduation, we would still go to all kinds of things. I've said before, my UCF sports attendance has dropped dramatically since we moved to Tampa, which is sad.
Yeah, because you won't go by yourself.
I will not. I absolutely will never do that. You're about to go on vacation by yourself, which I find super interesting.
I've done it before.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'm impressed by it. I'm not making fun of you. I think it's a very cool thing to do. It's just not. I can't even eat a meal by myself.
Kind of weird.
What, vacation by yourself? You're the only person I know who does this, but yeah,
it pushes. It's pushed me to actually like. I don't know. It's not in my comfort zone necessarily, because I also have to be very responsible, which is not, like I have to figure out my own plans, and like I'm on my own for it. So I don't know the city. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Which you've already announced. You're going to St. Louis. Can I say that? Is that like?
Yeah, I think I did. I say that? I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe you did.
I think I did. No, I'm pretty sure I did.
But anyway, right before we started recording, you were like, "Yeah, I land tomorrow. Don't know what I'm doing after I land." Like you're just gonna go into the city, which should be fun.
I like the only things I have planned. Like I have a tour of Busch Stadium on Tuesday morning, and then I'm going Tuesday night and Wednesday night to the Rays Cardinals games. That's literally it. There's some food spots around there.
What's the farthest you would go by yourself?
Like, leave me farthest like trip? Well, listen.
Like, would you go to like Europe by yourself?
I don't know. I've thought about it. Like I thought about, because I want to go see Tottenham play in London, and I'm like, if I don't know. Like if it's either don't go at all or go by myself, like I want to go. I don't want to like not do that. So I don't know. It does sound kind of weird though. Like not weird, but like that's a little more nerve-wracking, being in a completely different country.
Yeah.
Completely different, very different time zone, all alone, where I've never been before. So I don't know.
Meanwhile, I thought long and hard about a month ago about going to a movie by myself, and decided at the last minute I could not do it. So we were on different ends of the spectrum here.
We had this conversation off the podcast last week that like a movie is like the one thing you should do by yourself.
Perfect thing to do by yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a mental block about doing public things by myself. I always feel like I need a
I thought you did something recently where you went by yourself, and I was very proud of you for it.
I don't remember.
Did I make that up?
You might have made that up. You might have dreamt. I might have told you I was planning to do something and then didn't do it. I don't think I've done anything by myself.
I thought it was a UCF game. Like I thought there was a game that you were going to. That like was it a basketball game, or did you end up not going by yourself?
No, I didn't go by myself. I found someone.
Maybe that's what it was then. I thought you're like, oh yeah, I think I'm gonna go. And I was like, oh good.
Can't do it. Like I said, I'm not hating. If you listeners out there do things by yourself, I'm incredibly impressed. I wish I had that skill. It's just for whatever reason I cannot.
I've tried to learn it. I'm still not that great at it, but I'm doing it.
Doing it, man. Yeah.
I know I'm doing it, but I'm just like it's still kind of weird for me. But all right. Tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. Tweet of the week is an interesting one this week. So the UCF Knights account so if you're not following, all the Pac-12 schools officially joined the Big 12, like are now officially members at the start of August. So they all joined. And the UCF Knights Twitter account posted a very cool Big 12 family portrait. I think it looks like it's hand drawn. It was all the Big 12 mascots stuffed into a little like
Yeah,
picture together. It was very, very
they did
cool.
one last year.
Yeah, did they? Okay. And if you zoom in, there's
Yeah.
lots of cool little touches and things, and everyone, I don't know why they did this. I don't know who made it. All the mascots are so excited, like fight with each other and like, ah. And then in the corner is the Utah. Have we determined if it's a hawk or an eagle? I'm not
Oh, I
sure.
don't know.
The Utah bird,
I think it's a hawk.
think it's a hawk, is in the corner and is just so sad. Like everyone's smiling and laughing. The Utah hawk is just head down, like beak drooped, like sad eyes, sad little beak, and just out of nowhere. Like, and honestly, I didn't even notice it initially. The only reason I noticed it is because national accounts started being like, hey, I think UCF has caught on to the fact that Utah is being really lame about how they've joined the Big 12. Because if you have been following all this realignment stuff, not Utah. Well, yeah, Utah, the administration too, but particularly their fans were like the one school who were really like throwing a fit about going to the Big 12. Like they thought they should be in the Big 10 or something, which is cute and hilarious. But tweet of the week doesn't go to that UCF tweet. It goes to the official Utah athletics account who replied to the UCF tweet with a close up of the Hawks face, and they like sharpied in a smile on the beak and just said, "We pumped." I've never seen. I think the closest I've ever seen to this is like, I don't know, like not to get political, but when Trump drew the hurricane Sharpie thing, do you remember that?
Not really.
That was what it reminded
Sounds
me
like
of. But I just
sounds like it.
I've never seen anything like that. Just was so funny. I
It
don't
is a
know.
hawk. It's swoop. A red is a red-tailed hawk.
I think we have red-tailed hawks in
So
Florida. But anyway, so if you see the UCF tweet, it's great. You can zoom in on the sad hawk, and if you scroll down, there's Utah, which literally just flipped the frown upside down on the hawk. It still has the sad eyes, so now it just looks sleepy but happy. Like I don't know. It's just it was an interesting
you
decision.
you sent this to me the other day, and you were like, or I think you just said, "Is Utah or is UCF trying to start a rivalry with Utah?" And I was like, "Regarding what? Like, what do you mean?" And then you sent me that. And I was like, "I don't know why they did that. Like, I don't know." But it was
It's
made for
more
good
funny to me.
conversation
It's funny that UCF did it. It's funny that Utah saw it and was like, "We're gonna have to respond to this. Like, we can't let
by
this lie."
by changing it to a smile.
Yeah, I just what this is what college football Twitter is for, and we love it very
Yeah,
much.
yeah. We're like entering peak college football Twitter time because like everybody's just itching for the season. So
Yep, we are
it's
very
gonna be great.
close.
But yeah, speaking of that, we'll be back next week with episode 219 as we get even closer to kickoff. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at Bailey J Adams 22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.